Good evening, everybody. Kazimbe Abena, and this is Cultivating Intimacy. Some technical difficulties again. I apologize, my sincere apologies. But we are getting started again. This is Cultivating Intimacy. My name is Kazimbe Abena, known as the Heart Whisperer, certified holistic practitioner, and intimacy coach. And we are doing love languages number 4 tonight. We're doing acts of service. And I'm just going to get right on into this thing because it's already, I believe, like 9:15. So again, I don't know what's going on with my computer, but it's all good. It's all good. We're here. We're here. So my apologies. Let me invite some folk. Really, I really need to invite some people if I can. Can I even invite people now? What's going on here? Yes, I can. All right. So let me just invite some folks. Let me invite some people. I hope everyone had a great week. I really do. It is an interesting time that we're in. A lot of things happening, and what I'm seeing is that folks really need to more than ever. Really need to make sure that they are present. Make sure that they are present and that they are really doing their best to stay centered. There's a lot going on in the world right now, so that's one reason out of many that I'm doing these broadcasts. One reason out of many. All right, so I'm just going to get right into it. I don't want to waste any more time. So I'm going to show the book that I am using. Again, this is Love Languages, written by Gary Chapman. Great book, and it gives a kind of some really concrete, practical ways to bring emotional support into your relationship. And as an intimacy coach, as a holistic practitioner, there are a lot of people that come to me with issues, in their relationships within themselves. And I'll be the first to say that the first relationship starts with yourself. And then because if we are having a tough time relating to who we are, if we're having a tough time being authentic, which I really believe that at least 95% of us at some point in our lives have had a tough time even identifying or living in our own skin or standing in our own truth, you're going to have a difficult time relating to other people. So that is the long and short of that. So basically it's going to get into, as we always do, we are going to do some talking about the love languages, and then I'll take some questions for anyone who has any questions about the relationships or wants to have a reading, and we will go from there. There may not be a lot of people online this time because again, came in here late and I don't know what's going on with my computer, but it looks like it's okay now. It looks like it's okay now. And so I'm just going to find this document that starts to talk about love languages and acts of service. And we're going to get right on into it. There we are. And who do I have on here so far? All right. Hey, Vicky, how are you? Thanks for joining up. All right, so this is Love Languages, Acts of Service. So, some of the things I'm going to say tonight we've already said, and that's kind of good because you want to hear some things repeated, some principles repeated, so that it basically becomes part of your consciousness and becomes part of your waking life. So active service is just the way it sounds. Doing something is providing a service, providing a chore, providing an action, getting something done for someone that they want done. Again, that they want done. So Gary Chapman basically, you just woke up. Well, thanks for joining, Vicky. So Gary Chapman basically says he cites this instance with this couple where the wife was unhappy with the husband, and the husband didn't understand why, because he was doing all these things. But he was doing things basically that really kind of he wanted to do, but it really wasn't about what his wife wanted. So again, kind of going back to the basics, love languages is of course for yourself so that you understand and you know what makes you emotionally supported, what makes you happy. But you can't forget the other side of it. It's also is about what makes your mate happy. Because a relationship is not just with yourself, it's with the other person as well. So just something very basic. All right, so a couple things that come up when we're talking about acts of service. Um, so Gary Chapman talks about this instance where both spouses had the same love language, but they really were like they were at their wits' end and about to get a divorce. So they were definitely on the rocks. And he says that you not only have to be concerned with the love language, but you also have to be concerned with your dialect in the love language. And I kind of just explained that, which means that, okay, yes, I like chores to be done. Well, if you're telling me, if my love language is acts of service and, you know, I like the living room vacuumed, and what you're doing is you're dusting off the porch, or you're washing the dishes, or you're washing the car, or you're doing something else that's not even related to the home, then that's not going to speak my dialect. So it's important to really be specific when we're talking about love languages. It's very important to communicate in no uncertain terms what we like. It's not the time to be shy or coy or to be modest. Hello, Valerie. How are you, love? Thank you for joining. So that's why lists are so important. Lists are so important. You make a list and you share those lists of what you desire and what you need done with your mate. We're going to go over that a little bit later in a minute. So what is also important when dealing with love languages and just the way people act is to understand, and I hear this come up all the time between couples, particularly married couples, is that, oh my goodness, the behavior before the marriage and now the behavior after are completely different. So what Gary Chapman says, and I agree with this, is that there's no indication, and therefore it's a bit foolish to assume that the behavior before the marriage is going to be the same as the behavior in the marriage after you're married. And the reason that he says this is because before people get married, number one, they're on their best behavior. One person is courting another, and the other person is showing up in their best, their highest and greatest good, smile on their face. Also, people are they're under the spell, if you will, of being in love, falling in love. I found the man or the woman of my dreams. We're going to ride off into the sunset. So that high is carrying them through, along with the anticipation of that whole, dreamland, dreamscape, fairy tale scenario that we all kind of probably at some point have at least thought about. Well, that's all driving the behavior. So you're doing all that you can. And there's something interesting that happens with men. This whole hunter thing that is in our genes, this whole hunter focused aggression, focused acquisition of goods or things or the prey, that whole thing can be playing out as well. I'm not saying it plays out all the time, but it plays out a lot. It plays out a lot. And all of a sudden, when we've acquired our target, so to speak, I'm good. Behaviors change. Same thing with a woman. I've thrown out my feminine wiles. I've swooned you. I've done this and I've done that. And I got you now, so I can just kind of sit back and just relax. Both men and women do that. The problem with that is that it objectifies the other. In doing that, men objectify women as something to obtain, and women do the same sort of objectification. They objectify as well in different ways, i.e., if the man is the breadwinner, you're something to get that I acquired to provide for me, and then men do it, and you're an arm piece, you're a trophy wife, you represent me, and you represent something that says that I made it, that whole thing. I guess women can do that as well. Again, I'm really talking in some very basic generalizations here, and I'm just trying to illustrate a point. Obviously, this does not always happen. Obviously, there are uh, um, many differing opinions to this, and some exceptions to the rule. But we certainly have heard where this happens. So we want to be very careful about objectifying our spouse or objectifying the person that we're with, um, because what that does too is that, yeah, and thank you. It does happen all the time. Thank you. Thank you, Vicky. And because what happens is that we forget that we're dealing with a human being. And if we forget that we're dealing with a human being, we forget that we're dealing with someone who needs emotional support, that has emotions, that has feelings, that's going to feel what we do or what we don't do. So we've really got to keep that in our mind and be aware of that. And understand that marriage is not something, it's a relationship and it's a journey. It's not a project, or it's not something to acquire. It's not something to get. It's something to be and to do for the long run. And it's a relationship that you make constant investments in. Constant investments in. And it's a partnership. It's a partnership. So, in continuing, there is something that Gary Chapman points out in Acts of Service, that if you're trying to get someone to do acts of service, and we mentioned this back in the other love languages, that offering love and doing things out of love, it's a choice. It's a choice. If someone is doing it out of fear, it will eventually turn into resentment. If someone is doing it out of guilt, it will eventually turn into resentment. So it needs to be their choice without any pressure. So we really need to be careful to couch what we want in requests and not demands, so that we're giving the other person the choice of how they want to show that they love us. And when they make a choice to do that, when they make the choice to show us that they love us, it's a more permanent thing. And they feel better about what they're doing, because why? Because they chose to do it. They chose to do it of their own volition. That's very important. Very important. I've got a couple comments here. Vicky, be and do with pleasure. Yes, indeed. Absolutely. All right, and so moving on. When our mate, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, significant other, etc., when they are criticizing what we do not do or what we have not done, while it can be infuriating and frustrating, what we may want to do is take a step back and look at what they're saying. Because in that moment, they're expressing a deep emotional need. I need you to do something because it makes me feel good. And it makes that, if you do that, it will let me know that you love me. It will be part of that. It will let me know, along with other things, that you love me. Hence, love language. So instead of getting angry at someone, ask them, well, why is this important to you? If you do that, you may get a story. You may get a story. It may be something that happened in childhood that the person didn't get, that the person was really affected by, or that the person had to do themselves and hated to do it and received no help and didn't feel that they could do well, and now they have a spouse or mate to come along to help them. and you helping them with this chore, you doing this for them, will really show them that you're thinking about their feelings and how they feel about things. So that's something to consider. It's not always easy, and I think it's important for both spouses to understand how they're saying what they're saying and when they're expressing something that they want done, and give the person an opportunity to respond and a person an opportunity to do it out of their own volition, out of their own choosing. Because all of a sudden a demand or a nag can turn into, you know what, this happened to me when I was younger. I have a phobia about doing this. That's why I need you to do it. I used to have to do this and I would get beat when I did it wrong, so I hate to do it. I'd really appreciate you if you did this for me. There's a host of things that can come up. Can you please do this? So all of a sudden a demand turns into, hey, can you do this for me because I really need it? So that's something interesting to really consider. I thought that was a light bulb moment for me in reading love languages. Moving along, something interesting that Gary Chapman says about roles. He says basically in the last 30 years, things have changed so much that the common stereotypes for males and females in society have not been completely removed, but they've been removed a lot. They're not completely gone, but a lot of the old school ones have died off. That's important because in our meeting our requests by our spouses in trying to match their love language, in trying to support them in their love language, we may find ourselves doing things that our mother and father, grandmother, grandfather did not do. That takes us out of the scope or out of the understanding of what we think a man should do in a relationship or what we think a woman should do in a relationship. And that's really important. That's really, really important. Eye contact with intimate touch. Oh, very nice. Good, 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 good. Thank you for that, Vicky. So that's yours. Thank you. Vicky was just talking about how she basically needs eye contact with intimate touch. She needs a person to be present, to know that they're there for her, and that helps. So again, we want to make sure that we are not allowing some past stereotypes that someone else practiced, that we don't carry those into our relationships, when that very well may not be what our mates want at all. And at the same time, I really want to encourage everyone to be sure to really make your own rules. You are in the relationship. I understand that our relation, and I've said this before, I understand our relationships affect people around us. They affect our families. They affect the community. I get all that. But at the end of the day, it's you and your spouse. And you all are around each other a lot. You go to bed with each other. You wake up with each other. You do chores with each other. You run the household. You live your lives with each other. So you all need to be really loyal to each other. And if it works for you two, then it works. Period. Then it works. I think one of the most damaging things we can do, while it's important to be open to wisdom from elders and friends, I think one of the most damaging things we can do is allow other people to run our relationship for us. And it's dangerous for a couple reasons. Number one, they're not you two. They're not the people in the relationship, so they're not in your heads. They haven't had the history that you've had. They don't have the same emotional needs. They don't have the same background. And in that, not that their intentions are necessarily bad, but these people simply may not have the same intentions. And they may not be bad intentions, but they still may not have the same intentions. So those two things in and of themselves are highly problematic and lead to some serious issues. So we need to really be aware of that. T.L. Johnson says, yes, Lord, mamas. Indeed, indeed, indeed. And, I think we all have certainly heard about, father-in-laws, mother-in-laws getting involved and this and that. And, we need to make sure that our loyalty stays to our spouse, because our relationship, our marriage is with our spouse. And then it's with everyone else in secondary or tertiary levels. And that's really important to know. And we need to really stand up in our truth. Really need to stand up in our truth. Meaning that if it works for you too, and you all are happy, and there is love, and there is growth, and there is evolution, then it works. Dismiss the fact that it has to look like other relationships and other people. Again, if it works for you, if there's an exchange of love, if there's emotional happiness, if there's support, if there's evolution, that's what you want. That's what you want. If you got there another way, but in that way you are happy and you are satisfied and you are content and you are evolving, then that's your way. And I will be the first to say that sometimes that's hard to do. That's hard to do. Sometimes it's hard to live outside the box, to live without a blueprint, to make your own rules. I don't believe that we in the Western society were really raised to do that. But so when we step out to do that, it can be scary at first. It can be very scary. But just keep in mind that you have each other. And with that, I also want to say that you want to make sure that your loyalty is to each other. You want to make sure that before you consider someone else's opinion, particularly about your spouse or your mate, you want to make sure that you're regarding your spouse first. So you should know your spouse better, other than maybe the parents. Even maybe so, because they see them as a daughter or a son, but you see them as your mate. So you should know them better than any other person. So don't forget what you know about that person. Don't allow some outside influence to twist your perspective of what you know about your spouse. Messy free spirit marriage. All right. And once you make your rules, stand on them. Stand firm on them. It's not that you don't have any rules, you don't have any parameters, but stand on them. Figure them out. Write them out. Make lists. Whatever you need to do. All right. So going back to acts of service. Again, talking about stereotypes. Don't be afraid to step outside of what you thought you knew in terms of stereotypes, because there is no reward for upholding and maintaining stereotypes. There's no reward for that. But there is tremendous benefit from supporting your spouse emotionally. There is tremendous benefit from making your spouse happy and feeling loved. You'll only get that love back. So that's huge. Any other comments or questions about what's been said so far? I'm just going to go through Vicky, you say organic. Indeed. Indeed. Allow things to evolve. Let them be organic. I think that's a very good point, Vicky. Let it not be forced. Whatever you all decide to do, allow it to be a mutual decision. I see a lot of times where one spouse will want to do something and have a particular lifestyle and another spouse will not. And they'll force it and try to make it work anyway. And the thing about it is that, on one hand, the spouse who wants to step outside the box, that's really who they are. And on the other hand, the spouse that wants to stay in the box, that's really who they are. So there's no right or wrong here. There's no right or wrong. I would say first, do your best to try and work it out to stay together. But if you can't, but when we try to force another person to agree with us and to do what we do, and it's not in their heart and it isn't who they are, that can really lead to a lot of problems, a lot of anger, a lot of deep, deep resentment, and a lot of hurt and a lot of pain. All right, so just wrapping up acts of service. A couple ways you can do this. You can get the acts of service jumping off for your mate. And we've said this before, we're back to lists again. Make a list of requests that your spouse has made of you so that you can kind of keep track and figure out what's important to them. And then do one a week for as long as you can. Another easy one, if you have children, have your children, when your spouse is away, help you to do a task or a chore or an act of service that you know your spouse wants, that you've been putting off for the longest. Maybe it's painting a room. Maybe it's doing some work in the garden. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's landscaping, whatever it may be. And do that with your children. Maybe it's cooking a special type of dish, a special type of dinner. That spouse comes home, they open the door, you stand there with your children, greeting them and say, hey, we love you, we did such and such. So now it's not just you, it's you and your entire family. Giving your spouse love from all of you. The love quotient, the love tank just fills up to the top. So that's a beautiful way to do it as well. Turn a nag into a tag. So if there's really something that your spouse has been wanting you to do, and it's not something that you really like to do, but you're going to do it because you love them, do it. And then let's say it's washing the car. Then put a note or put a tag and say, hey, you know what? To you with love. To your spouse, your spouse's name with love. Great way to do that. Another simple way is sit down with your spouse one night and say, hey, for this week, what would you really like done? What is the number one thing that you want done this week? They tell you what it is, you get it done. You do it. So they're putting a request out there, and you're meeting that request. Something that you know is important. You're not having to guess. You're not having to use, no mind reading. They've told you what they want. So you know it's automatically going to mean and bring them happiness. Automatically. So those are just a couple ways to bring more joy through the acts of service. Very simple and very easy to do. Any comments, any questions? Anyone have any questions in terms of any readings or anything like that they like? Any questions, anything they'd like for me to check out for them while I'm in this space? About some relationships, about them, about some things they've encountered. I find this a lot, that people, and really it's about people really, not communicating enough and not really knowing how to communicate properly. I don't think we haven't been raised to really communicate honestly and openly. And when we do express issues, we tend to do it in an accusatory way. And we don't have to. It doesn't have to be like that. So, all right, well, I am going to cut this short if there are no other comments or questions. Well, not cut it short, but there has some technical difficulties, so I came online a little bit late here. So I know that affected the attendance. So, but I will have this video up. Let me make a few announcements. I've got some things coming up end of this month. Number one, okay, Valerie, you're asking me what I think is the best, form of communication. Um, it's really up to you. The beauty of this is you can determine that for yourself. Meaning, perhaps you leave notes for each other. Uh, Perhaps you leave voice messages. Perhaps you have a time that you talk every night at dinner, or in the morning before you go to work. And then it comes down to the best way to communicate what, communicate issues, communicate, just check in for the week or the day, to communicate about finances. What's the best way to communicate about children? So it really comes down to you, and that obviously could be a trial and error thing. With communication, I would just say that one of the most important things is to be prepared to listen. Be prepared to listen. And sometimes we don't always need to fix things. That's something that men have really got to understand, and I have to tell myself constantly this myself. Because someone is telling me something doesn't mean that they want something to be fixed. So you're saying, Valerie, in terms of intimacy, what's the best way to communicate intimacy? Um, well, I'm not quite sure what you're saying, but part of the reason I'm doing this series on the love languages is to give people some ideas of what really works for them. Um, some people love to be touched. Some people, and there are five, so some people love touch. Some people love words of affirmation. Some people love acts of service. Some people love quality time. And if I can remember the other one here, some people love receiving gifts. So it depends. It depends. Vicky says here, honest. So honesty. Just whatever you're doing, it's got to be honest. It's got to be honest, whatever you're doing. And I'm not quite sure, Valerie, if you're talking about intimacy, like love making in terms of you know how to uh, how to get that started, or if you're talking about something else, Valerie. So let me know. Let me know what you mean. Okay, and Valerie, until you just give me a little more information if you are able to, and I will and post it, and then I'll respond to it. Until then, I'm going to respond to Tracy's. So Tracy says, one issue that I have with acts of service, okay, is that it becomes repetitious and nobody feels appreciated. For instance, I know my maid appreciates the house being clean, dinner cooked, clothes washed and folded, the basics. But in doing this, I feel like I get lost in the process. Thank you is nice. I notice how hard you work, etc. Okay, so you're saying that you don't really feel appreciated, that it gets monotonous. Let me ask you this. Where are you in terms of receiving, in terms of having your love languages met, Tracy? Okay. Are your love, because there are things that are just mundane that need to be done. But are your love languages being met, Tracy? Do you feel that your love tank is full? On a scale of 1 to 10, how full is your love tank? Tracy. And I see your comment, Valerie. I haven't forgotten about you. You said to initiate it. I got you. Because I think what I'm getting at here, Tracy, is that, hey, honestly, most of relationships is a bit mundane. You're going to have peaks and valleys, but it's really mundane. Okay. It's about a 4. Okay. Well, I would say that's the issue, Tracy. It's not, that's the issue, is that you've got to make sure that your mate knows your love languages, number one, and you've got to make sure that your love tank is being filled. And you've also got to make sure that while what you're doing is important, there may be another love language that can kind of rekindle and spark some more emotional support that not only your spouse needs, but that you need as well. So make sure that, again, we want to make sure that we are giving each other what we need and not what we think each other needs. So again, you can simply go on Google and you can type in love languages, PDF, and you can download the 30-question quiz. I would suggest, Tracy, that you and your spouse do this so that each of you know. I am doing a intimacy workshop on the 29th of this month, which is a Saturday, July 29th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And I'm going to have, okay, you've done that, okay. And I'm going to have the love languages there and have people fill them out. So that they can, and sometimes they change. Sometimes they change over time. Sometimes they change over time. Honestly, Tracy, what I'm getting for you guys is that there is just there's a plateau. There's a plateau, and it happens. There needs to be a spark. There needs to be a spark. There's a plateau. It's almost like, it's really just as you said. It's almost like you all need to like rededicate yourselves, and you all need more things to do. I think what it seems that's happened is that you all have got into the routine of marriage, and while there are always things to do, it seems like that has overtaken the relationship, and it happens. It happens. Yeah, we'll talk. We'll talk. I don't want to say too much else about that, so we'll talk. All right, so Valerie, let me come back to yours. All right, so to initiate intimacy. Well, some men like aggression. Some men like, let me give you some ideas. Your spouse comes home a certain time from work. You've got the lights on low. You're in lingerie. You're in your bedroom. You've got music playing low. You can do that. You can actually make date nights once a week or twice a month or once a month or however many times you need it. You can decide to, again, go back to love languages and think of some more creative ideas to communicate. So let's say that your spouse's love language is words of affirmation. Maybe you write on their mirror, some words of affirmation every morning in lipstick. Who knows? Maybe you put it in their jacket, a card in their jacket, with words of affirmation, some things you love about them, every day for a week, or in their hat, something that they take with them all the time. Maybe you put in a card in their hat or in their jacket what you want to do to them that evening, or what you want them to do to you in terms of intimacy, to kind of spark, so every time they get up there's something new, and then they come back and you do those things that evening. So there are a host of ways to do that. Maybe you guys start off with a walk in the park, a walk under the moon, at the beach. So it just really depends on the type of spouse or mate that you have, and you kind of go from there. But I just want to give you some ideas. Vicky, you're saying this causes me fear and anxiety. What causes you fear and anxiety, Vicky? What do you mean? So let me know. And it's almost 10 o'clock. Got like 3 more minutes. You're welcome, Valerie. Thank you. I hope that helped. Thank you. Thank you. And let me know. You can hit me up offline, Valerie, and let me know if you have some other more specific questions. As you can as well, Tracy. Well, we said we're going to talk offline anyway. So, Vicky, you're saying approaching intimacy causes you fear and anxiety. Okay. Well, we've talked about some things as to why. We're going to get in that further, but Vicky, I think that you're on the right path to change that. And one thing I want you to do is I want you to change your language about that. You're a human being. You deserve intimacy and love and nurturing like anyone else. So I really want to encourage you to change your language in regard to that, because it's not the intimacy that you fear. It's really, I believe, other events and other things that are in your head that you fear. But intimacy in and of itself is fine, but we're attaching other things to it. So we'll talk more about that. But thank you for sharing, Vicky. Thank you for sharing. But go ahead and let's start to speak affirmatively in terms of who you are and how things make you feel. Because you have the power and you deserve to have what you want. You absolutely deserve to have what you want. All right. All right, everybody, it's about 10 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and close it out. I want to thank you all so much for joining in. So again, I've got a couple of events coming up at the end of this month rather. So the 28th and the 29th. Evening, Friday of the 28th, 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. in Atlanta. A synergetic BDSM workshop is $50 each. You'll find that on my Facebook page. And then the next day, Saturday the 29th, from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m., a Cultivating Intimacy workshop. So in that workshop, we'll be doing some hands-on exercises, and we'll be emphasizing and re-emphasizing some of the things I've talked about and beyond in this broadcast on Tuesday nights. So I'm really excited about that. Really, really excited. And then later on in the year, we're talking about Let's see, we're talking about October is the Art of Sacred Sexuality Retreat. And just type that workshop in or type that retreat in. That's in Destin, Florida. It's going to be fantastic. Actually, it's just one. That's just one. Yeah, that's just one. So that's what we got going on. So definitely check me out. I hope that you can attend at least one, if not all of these. And stay in contact. Next week, we are going to do the final love language. The final love language, which is dun, 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 physical touch. And from this book here. And then we're going to continue, actually, we're going to continue to talk about some things in regard to love languages. All right? All right, please spread the word and invite people and post and share this if you feel so inclined. And again, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for your comments. And I look forward to seeing you next week. Peace and love to you. Again, this is Cultivating Intimacy. My name is Kazembe Abane, the Heart Whisperer, holistic practitioner, and intimacy coach. Have a great evening. See you next time. Bye-bye.